Hello, I'm bekkiflaherty, and this week I'm going to be showing you how to use this trailing floral template to make this pattern here. This template is the second one of a set of 6 which you can find in my Etsy store, but if you want to test the concept out first, you can get this template for free from my Pattern Maker's Toolkit, follow along with that one and swapping in the colours and flower shapes we're using here today. For accessibility, this video has fully edited subtitles and it's also got timestamps set up, so if you're a regular and want to go ahead and skip to the beginning of the tutorial, please do so now. This is a more advanced level tutorial, so if you've never made a pattern using the diamond method in Procreate before, then you should check out this video first because it covers everything in much more detail and at a slower pace than I'm going to go today. I also have lots of more beginner friendly pattern tutorials on my channel, which will help you get better acquainted with the way I make my pattern repeats. This next part is very important. You may be used to dragging and dropping files into Procreate, but if you do it with PSD files, it will flatten all the layers, so be sure to import it the way I'm about to show you. Also, yes, the thumbnails are white and look empty, but I'll explain why in a second. So let's get started. From the gallery screen here in Procreate, we're going to import our floral canvas. We're going to bring in Canvas 02 here, and the first thing we need to do is turn the sketch group on. The reason I've saved the files with this turned off is that, believe it or not, it actually makes the file size smaller and allows me to upload them to Etsy in one single zip file. So don't panic when you initially download the files and all you can see is blank thumbnails. The template layers are all there, they're just turned off here in the layers panel. So you see it's got all the layers and the groups you'll be familiar with if you've followed one of my pattern tutorials before. These templates though don't have any texture overlays on them. So we're going to start drawing in our sketch group here, and we're going to add a layer above the sketch diamond. I'll turn this template layer off. The sketch diamond is just this empty diamond here. So if you don't have this canvas set up and you're using the free template, above your template layer, you need to add a layer and you just need to draw a rough diamond that goes all the way off the edges like this. So you just need to draw a diamond shape like this that goes from the middle of one edge to the other. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be precise. It just needs to go off the edges on all 4 of these sides here. And then you can use this diamond in place of the sketch diamond that we have here and follow along with what we're doing. So this template has got all of the stem, leaf and flower positions marked out for you, and we just need to trace over them. We are going to draw only the ones that are in black. The ones in blue will be made by duplicating the ones in black, and these pink ones on the edges we'll make later in our extra group. This should be familiar to you if you've watched me make patterns before, but if not, it will all become clear as we work through the pattern. As I said, if you've never ever made a pattern like this before, then this video here is a better place to get started. So because I've got all of the stems and leaves in place with this template, I'm not going to bother re-sketching those. I'm just going to add in my own versions of the flowers and also the leaves, I think, so that I can see how things are going to line up. So I'm going to start on this empty layer here, and I am going to use from this floral set this flower stamp here, and I'm just going to stamp it into the black circle shapes, not the blue ones, just the black ones. You can of course freehand these and draw any shapes you like. I just like to use floral stamps for speed in my sketch layer. This one here, although the stem that goes into it is pink, the circle itself is black, so that is one that we'll draw here on this layer. So that's all of those done. And then for the leaves, I feel confident enough to draw these as I go in my pattern layer and draw the final motifs. But if you want to do them in the sketch layer and kind of know exactly where everything's going to go, you can always draw these in your sketch layer as well. So if you want to change the shape of the leaves up, then I would do these in the sketch layer like that. I'm just going to stick with doing those, and then I'm going to freehand the rest in the pattern layer. So if you want to go ahead and do those in your sketch layer as well. And then when you have it all done, you can merge that down with the sketch diamond. Then we're going to duplicate this layer, tap to transform, and you need to make sure you've got snapping and magnetics on and the distance and velocity are all the way up. Then we can drag this down and snap it into this corner, and you'll see we need those orange lines there so that we know it's in the right place. And you'll see these flowers from up there are now down here in place, and these leaves from here are now in place down there as well. So that's how we're going to build out the rest of the pattern tile. So we duplicate this bottom one again, so the bits in the middle, we drag them up and up there and snap them into that corner. Duplicate the bottom one again and snap it over into this corner, duplicate again and snap it down here. Then these top 4 layers, you can pinch and merge those two together, And then I'm going to tap and invert the colours so we can see the difference between the ones we've drawn, these ones here, and the ones that will be made by duplicating. So when we come to do the illustrating, we'll just be drawing the ones that are in the black circles, the orange flowers, and then the blue ones will be made by duplicating this. So I've got enough in place there to go ahead and start illustrating this pattern. As I said, if you want to know exactly where your leaf shapes are going to be and you're changing the shape, you can do that on this sketch layer as well. So now I'm going to turn my pattern layer on, and I'm going to add a layer above it. And the first thing we're going to do is this green stem there, which goes all the way across the canvas from there and joins back in with this one here. That's what makes this a trailing floral template, because it crosses over both edges of the template. So we'll put that one in first. I'm going to use a light green colour for that. I'm going to grab my tracing crayon and I'm going to turn the stabilisation up for this one so that I can get a nice smooth line for this. Let's turn this so it's at a nice angle for drawing. I find I get nice smoother strokes if I'm working down the canvas like this, as opposed to kind of to the side or towards me. Let's start here and following the line as closely as I can. Go here and end behind this flower. This one is a much easier one to do because the place where we merge them together is actually going to be hidden behind a flower, so it's not too tricky to get them to merge together. So once we have that one in place, we can go ahead and draw all the rest in. And then when we've got all of our stems drawn in over the black dotted lines, we can add a layer underneath those. I'm going to turn the stabilisation off on my tracing crayon now, and I'm going to draw the leaves in underneath. And I'll use this darker colour to do that. As I said, I'm going to use this kind of more of a pointy shape on these, so just put those in like this. And go ahead and do that for all of these ones with the black dots on them. And then we're going to fill these leaves with colour drop. And then to fill these edge gaps here, we're going to duplicate the layer, add a Gaussian blur of 3%. Then we're going to hide this layer, tap to select on the hidden layer, and then tap somewhere in the space you haven't drawn and adjust the threshold so you come just inside the edge of your leaf but not past this line here. Then we can invert the selection, add a layer above and tap and fill it, and that's going to go ahead and fill all of those lines on all of the leaves all in one go. Then, making sure that you've deleted the in-between layer or it's hidden, you can pinch to merge those two together, and then you've got all of those shapes filled without those little blurry edge gaps in them. Sometimes you might have missed a few bits, especially on the ends of the leaves here, depending on how hard you were pressing, so it's always worth going through and checking and not just assuming that that's filled them all correctly. But it's definitely much quicker than going and having to trace over each one by hand. So the flowers, I want them to be this pale cream colour, which is going to not really show up with the white background. I'm eventually going to use this blue colour for the background, but working with a dark colour on the screen tends to have more reflection, so while we're working I'm just going to leave it set on this pale peachy colour and then we'll change the colour at the end. So let's add a layer above the stems on the top here, switch to this pale yellow colour, and we're just going to trace all of these flower shapes in. You can see here that's one of the instances of where that colour fill missed a little bit on the end there. And the nice thing about drawing all of these in freehand rather than just repeating a shape around the canvas, two things. One is you'll have an individual look to each flower, like not everyone is going to be exactly the same. And secondly, if you did transform these around, these edges would start to go fuzzy the more you move things around. When you transform and move things around in Procreate, it's not quite so good as other software at keeping the line work intact. It can get a bit softened and fuzzy. So by drawing each one of these individually, you get an individual look to each flower and you keep the image quality as high as it can be throughout the whole document. So we'll just go ahead and trace all the rest of these in now. And then as before, we're going to fill those with colour drop and then fix those edge gaps as well. And now I'm going to drag my sketch folder up above my pattern group so that I can see the lines that I need to work with, and I'm going to turn the opacity down on this sketch diamond there. And I'll also bring down the opacity on the template as well, and maybe make the blend mode here linear burn, and then we can see all those dots as well. So to add the line work detail, these petals, I'm going to use my line details brush, and I think I'll use this brown colour there. So to do this line work, I'm going to start kind of up here where the petal comes down. I'm going to press really faintly, come to the middle, pressing harder as I go, and then hold and snap the line. So it's going to look something like this. And then we hopefully should get a nice smooth graduation from the outside to the middle there. And yes, this is going to be kind of tedious having to do this for every single flower freehand, but trust me, by the time you got to having transformed it around, duplicating this bit, transforming it around, it would be all fuzzy and it wouldn't look the same as the one you'd started with. So it really is a case of having to draw these all freehand, but you know, it's quite meditative, relaxing work, so it's okay. If you do ultimately use Photoshop in your workflow, like I do, building these out with smart objects, you could just draw one of these and then transform the rest in Photoshop. Photoshop tends to do a much better job at keeping line work and details kind of the way they're supposed to look when you transform and scale and move them around. So if you wanted to just draw one of these and then put this together in Photoshop, that's a good compromise. Otherwise, we are just stuck with having to draw these one at a time, but it's definitely worth it because it's the details that make the pattern. So now we just have to repeat that for all of the others. So once all of that line work's done, we're going to add a few little dots in the middle. Do that on a separate layer above, and I'll just use black for the colour now, and we'll change it with a clipping mask in just a second. So I'm going to turn the template off so I can see the dots on the sketch diamond a bit better, and we can bring the opacity up on those. So then on this layer we've added this black colour here, just add in these dots, and go ahead and do that for all these flowers. Then I'm going to alpha lock this layer, use my colouring crayon and colour over it with some different colours, so we have a variety of colours in these, and we can turn the sketch off at this point so we can see better what we're doing. So colouring crayon, and we'll just add some colour differences to these. And whilst we're here, I'm going to change the blend mode on this layer to linear burn and bring the opacity down a little bit just to soften that a touch. So now if I turn our sketch folder on, all of the illustrating for this is done, and we need to put in these extra bits. So to do that, we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers, copy all, turn our extra group on where we illustrate the pink motifs, swipe down again and tap paste. Now we can duplicate this layer, tap, and with snapping and magnetics on, we can snap this over to this side there, making sure we've got that orange line there. Then this one we can bring over this way and snap that there, pinch those together, and now we've got this pink section in the middle where we can illustrate it in one piece without having it cut off at the edges. So then we just repeat what we did before, drawing in the stems. So we'll add a layer above, go back to our tracing crayon, and I'm going to turn the stabilization back up on this one while I do this part, and I'm just going to draw this stem in here and merge it in with this one here. And then when we put these back together later, this part will merge in nicely, just like it does here. The other place this will connect is here, but it's going to be hidden behind the flower, so we don't need to worry about having this line meet up. We just need to merge this line in with the main stem there. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat all of those illustration steps that we did for these motifs on these ones here now. To illustrate this extra pink flower here, on the layer that we pasted in, go back to your florals, grab the flower shape and just give yourself a template there to work with, which you can then trace over. And then once all of the pink motifs are illustrated, we're ready to put them back to the edges and start putting the pattern tile together. So let's hide these here, collapse our sketch group, turn that off, and I'll turn my pattern group off and the background colour. So all I have on show now here is the motifs in the extra group. So I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers, copy all, come up to the very top here, swipe down again, and we'll tap paste. Then we can hide our extra group, hide what we've just pasted in, and we'll show our pattern folder. I'm going to go in and hide this marker layer there, swipe down with 3 fingers, copy all, again we're up at the top here, swipe down again and paste. Then we can hide that pattern layer and we'll turn our background colour on now. Just hide this for a second and we'll put this back on the edges. So on this layer here, I'm going to put a mark off the corners, duplicate this layer, tap to transform, and we'll snap half of it to this edge and the other half to this edge. Then we can pinch and merge those two together, erase this part here, and now this, if we show our sketch layer, is back in place on the edges where it's supposed to be, but we still have the version here in the middle with all the layers where we could correct and change colours if we wanted to. So now we'll hide the sketch layer and turn this back on. And before you merge these together, you need to make sure that you have the extra part underneath. If you've got it on top, you're going to have stems coming down over flowers here. So that needs to go underneath. Then we can pinch and merge these together. And then so that we can build out the canvas, we're going to put a mark in each of these corners as well. So now we're going to duplicate this bottom layer and then snap it up into the corners the same way as we did with our sketch layer. Making patterns like this in Procreate is how I make all my patterns for both personal and professional projects. This last part here though, I normally do in Photoshop. I've got an automation set up to convert the pattern folder to a smart object and then to automatically duplicate it around the canvas just like I am here. It's so quick and easy, and you can do it just by pressing one button. Using smart objects means you don't have to flatten anything, and you can edit part of the pattern and it will update anywhere that part is repeated. In terms of quality, it's absolutely fine to do this part here in Procreate, but if you want max speed and editability in your workflow, then Photoshop smart object layers are definitely the way to go. So that is almost a finished pattern tile here. We've got a few bits of cleaning up to do. First of all, we need to erase these. So let's get rid of those first on the individual layers. Don't merge anything yet. So you can see here we've got a stem coming on top of the flower. So with this pattern here, the order you have your layers does matter. So we wanted to find this layer here, which is this bottom corner there, and drag it underneath our main layer. So we'll take this one and hide it under there. And then the other thing that we have to sort out is this here. You can see up here, this instance of it is correct. The stem goes underneath, but down here we've got the stem going on top. So we need to find this bottom corner here. And that one also needs to go underneath our main one here. I think that's all of the overlaps for this one. So it's just that part there and that part there that you need to look, and these two corners here need to go underneath this main one. So once all of that's in place, we can then merge all of that together. And although this background colour does look really pretty, I am going to change it to this original blue that I wanted to use. So there we go, that's our finished pattern tile all ready to go now. Using a diamond repeat like this will mean you don't get gaps when you upload to Spoonflower. But before we save and export, as always, we're going to check and make sure that that is definitely the case. So this is how you check before you export to make sure there's no gaps. So we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers and we're going to tap copy all. Then on the top layer here, we're going to tap paste. So now we've got a flattened version of our pattern tile. Underneath, we're going to add a layer and fill it with a contrasting colour. This is quite a dark pattern, so I'm going to fill it with white. Now we're going to tap and transform this top layer, and we're going to snap it up here into this top corner, and you'll see 1800 pixels there. Duplicate, and we'll drag it over here, and then zoom into the middle there and check you've got nothing suspicious going along that seam there. That's all looking okay. So we can now pinch those together, duplicate those, and snap that copy down to the bottom there. And again, show and hide this so you can see where the seam would be, and just zoom along there to make sure that's all lined up correctly too. And that's looking okay. You can find this template plus a set of 5 others over in my Etsy store, as well as my original Pattern Maker canvas and brush set, which has all the drawing brushes I've used today. If you're a Pattern Maker's Toolkit member, then you'll get 10% off everything in my Etsy store. The Pattern Makers Toolkit is like a Patreon group, except it's free. You get access to all the resources in the Pattern Makers Toolkit on my website, including those I make for my Skillshare classes, early access to some of my YouTube tutorials and drawing prompts, discounts in my Etsy store, and one new freebie exclusively via email every month. If you want to learn more about my Procreate to Photoshop workflow using automations and smart objects, you can find that on Skillshare. If you're new to Skillshare and you sign up with the link below, you'll get an extra 30 days for free. All of the links are in the description, and lastly, don't forget to subscribe here if you want to see more pattern tutorials like this every week. That's all from me today. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you soon.